For crude oil, closing at a new high of 87 and 53 cents a barrel.
For months, we've been hearing that these high prices would put the brakes on consumer spending, but it really hasn't so far. We're going to ask our panel right now, Peter Schiff, president of Europe Pacific Capital, Pat Powell of the Powell Financial Group, and David Tice, portfolio manager at Prudent Bear Funds. So, David, to you first. Another record today on oil. Does that worry you at all?
Well, it should be worrying people because people have talked about how oil is not that big of a part of GDP, but it's still a very important component of the consumer. And he's driving a bigger car that doesn't get very good gas mileage. Prices are up a lot. This partly due to the U.S. dollar that's been falling off a cliff. And so prices keep going up. We also have a peak oil problem down the road. It's a real concern.
What does this do to corporate profits?
It will hurt corporate profits, for sure. And we think corporate profits are going to slow down because of the slowing U.S. consumer. We think this subprime issue that's spread into other corporate debt, this is the end of a credit bubble. We think this is huge. Their structured finance is no longer trusted.
Pat, what did Paulson tell you today that gave you a hint one way or the other how the economy might be going? Because he has access to a lot of data that the rest of us don't.
Yeah, he seemed a bit nervous about the economy, to say the least. So I'm sort of reading between the lines because he's not that concerned because he's not stepping in. All right, he basically still said, let the free markets work their way through this. And I think that when you look at that, it's always the free markets that are the most efficient and the cheapest way to work through anything.
When you look at the market today, does that tell you that, in fact, the free markets are sort of digesting his news without panicking?
Yeah, I actually think that they're focused a little bit more about what's going on in the Mideast. I think they're looking at what's going on in Turkey. I think there's immediate pop when the Turkish Parliament passed a resolution, or was trying to pass a resolution to go into Iraq after the Kurdish rebels. So I think there's a real political risk here, and I don't want to confuse the two.
Peter Schiff, over to you. We were looking at some comments by OPEC. More demand, less supply. Does that concern you at all?
Well, sure, it concerns me, but I mean, I own a lot of oil, so I'm benefiting from it. But the more inflation the Fed creates, the higher oil prices are going to go. We can't give OPEC debased dollars and expect them to keep selling it to us for the same price. And when David talked about the fact that oil is a smaller part of our GDP, the only reason for that is all the products that we used to manufacture ourselves, we now import. So oil is still important. It's just that we don't see it in oil. We see it in the price of the consumer goods we import.
Well, David was actually agreeing with you, I think. He was saying that oil is still important, even though we don't have the big companies that use so much of it.
I was just elaborating on why. I mean, why it's a smaller part of our economy. Because our economy is no longer manufacturing. We're consuming and importing. But we're still going to feel it. And you know what's going to send oil prices north of $150 a barrel?
$150 a barrel?
Yes, it's going to be when the Chinese government comes to its senses and stops suppressing the value of their own currency, lets the free market set the exchange rate of the yuan. When that happens, the yuan is going to gain dramatically, so will currencies throughout Asia, and then oil prices for the Asians will drop sharply, causing an explosion in demand for energy in Asia, at the same time sending the U.S. dollar price of oil through the roof.
All right.
Did you hear 150? I don't know if everybody here would agree with that.
Checking my hearing just a second. David, here's where we are. Up $1.48 today, 87.61 for a barrel of crude. We've got inventory data coming out this week. You think that's going to be a further push for oil prices to go higher?
I'm not on top of the inventory number digging right now, but I do believe that we have a longer-term supply problem, and as Peter said, we have a currency problem. And currency is being debased, and therefore the price to the U.S. consumer and to America is going to go up. And I can't argue with Peter's statement about down the road being $150.
By the way, Dagan was...
Oh, that was Cheryl, by the way.
This is Cheryl.
David gets to hang out with all the women at the Fox Business Network, just so you know.
I apologize.
There's a basic tenet of economics, and that is the cure for high prices is high prices. And the cure for
what do you mean by that?
The cure for high oil prices is high oil prices. As the price goes up, we have to make other decisions. Businesses are making them first. Individuals, it takes longer. The average car on our road is 8.9 years old. It's going to take a long time to replace replace that with fuel-efficient cars. It's not going to happen overnight.
Well, and also, Pat, people keep driving, though. I mean, we see this every summer. People bellyache about gas prices, then they drive anyway. It doesn't change anything.
They do, but they're still driving the car that they bought 3-4 years ago. And what we're talking about is on your next car, maybe you're going to go and give a Prius a test drive. Maybe you won't buy it, but you're going to at least give it a try.
Could it make Anwar a little more desirable place to drill, Peter?
Well, you know, a big part of the problem, though, is that oil prices aren't really rising so much as the value of money is falling. So oil is not getting more expensive. Our money is becoming less valuable. So you're not going to get that big increase of supply or reduction in demand. Ultimately, what's going to kill demand in the United States is going to be Americans who are not going to be able to afford to borrow any more money. I mean, we're putting all this oil on our charge cards. We've been borrowing out of our homes. We're not going to be able to do that. The rest of the world isn't going to loan us money to buy oil. They're going to buy the oil themselves.
All right, guys, we're going to